Hello, hello. Hi, everybody. Hey, guess where I am today? Look, I'm in jolly old England at Balmoral Castle. It's amazing, isn't it? The combination of that technology and some artificial intelligence to throw voices and put you in places you never imagined. Well, here's a place you've imagined. Parks Casino. Let me ask you something. Who would you most want to see? Wayne Newton, Jay Moore and Daryl Hammond from SNL, Styx, Foreigner, Nick Offerman, Jerry Cantrell from Alice in Chains, or Joe Conklin and the City Rhythm Orchestra. I think I'd go for Conklin. He's funny as all get out, and I love when he does the voices. The City Rhythm Orchestra, it's so funny to see how big they've become, because in a prior life, I worked with a guy named Pete Spina. And Pete is like one of the leaders or the leader of the City Rhythm Orchestra. They were our wedding band. And our wedding was a surprise wedding. People came thinking that they were going to a cocktail party, and instead it was our wedding. Long story, fun night. But the City Rhythm Orchestra played at my wedding. And now they're like headlining at Parks with Joe Conklin, which I just think is wild. And they deserve it, by the way. For information, tickets, or upcoming attraction data, go to visit, let me say it clearly, Parks Casino with an X, parkscasino.com. This is how you win. Got to be 21 or older. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Yeah, so you're seeing the sausage getting made today because we're trying to set up my backdrop and having some technical issues. Do you know how we do this, by the way? I do want to talk about Russia and Ukraine, but let me just show you what goes on, if I may. So it's a big flat screen behind me. It's just a typical TV monitor. I don't even know the brand on it, but it's probably like some, big ass Sony or something. Hey, Chris, are you able to change the slide? Okay, so watch what he does now. So he can put any slide up there at all. He had me at Balmoral Castle. Let's see where I'm going next. We're trying to tweak the color of my graphics. That's what kind of got us started on this whole thing today. How is everybody? Looks like the gang is, Buckingham Palace. Yeah, that's where I should be today. Keep that up. I love that. Good morning. Nobody would ever know. Good morning from London. I'm Michael Smerconish. All right. Well, he's going to play around with that because he's got to fix my slide. So what did I promise in the thumbnail in terms of some conversation today? There has really been, I think, a ratcheting up of the situation in Ukraine. A number of different developments this week. Oh, there we go. Now I'm back. See? That's my sky, but it looks bluer than it should. It should be purple because that's what we crafted. A number of events have transpired this week pertaining to the war in Ukraine. You've got, for example, President Xi spending Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, I think, 2 or 3 days with Putin. So, is China now going to up the ante relative to what's going on in Ukraine? That's one development. A second development would be what happened with that encounter between the Russian fighter jets and the U.S. drone. We spoke extensively about that over the Black Sea, led to the drowning of the drone. Then you had President Duda in Poland say, okay, we're going to give MiG fighters to Ukraine, making them the first of the Western alliance to do so. Slovakia then followed in kind. You've got the ongoing fighting in Bakhmut. You have Putin now designated as a war criminal. That story, a big story today, more in terms of the symbolism of it than any legal peril that he will face. You had what else? You had Ron DeSantis answer Tucker Carlson's questionnaire and say that he thinks that the situation in Ukraine is a territorial dispute. And then there was blowback from even the right-leaning Wall Street Journal. And then at the end of the week, speaking of the Wall Street Journal, John Bolton, Ambassador John Bolton, wrote an op-ed for the Wall Street Journal, essentially saying, and this is what inspired me for today's poll question, essentially saying that the West, including President Biden, will not let Ukraine win. The thesis is that there's this sort of elaborate dance that's taking place where we give them enough to keep Russia at bay, but not enough to actually win the war. And by the way, let me say right up front with regard to Bolton, and he's going to be my guest on CNN today, let me say that with regard to Ambassador Bolton, many people, and I saw this even in the comments appended to his piece at the Wall Street Journal, many people say John Bolton has never met a war that he didn't like. And then somebody else corrected that particular comment and said, no, he's never met a war that he doesn't love. But I think he raises some really interesting points, and some points that I've been making on radio about this and in my conversations with Admiral Stavridis. A little bit of Bolton. He's talking about the Nord Stream pipeline and how there was concern that maybe this was the sabotage was from pro-Ukrainian forces. And he makes the case, well, why wouldn't they? They're at war, right? How do you hurt Russia? This would be one way of doing so. Such a potentially harmful reaction exposes a larger problem which has repeatedly manifested itself since Russia's unprovoked aggression. NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, has been spooked by Moscow's threats to escalate the conflict in Ukraine if it isn't kept on a tight leash. Although President Biden failed, indeed barely tried to deter Russia's war, Putin has masterfully deterred NATO from responding robustly enough to end the conflict promptly and victoriously. Further along in the piece, Biden wants Russia to lose, but seems afraid of Ukraine actually winning. Does he have a point? You know, are we not giving them all they need to actually win? Of course, that raises another interesting question, which is, what does winning even look like? Is it a win if, I think it's 17% now of Ukraine that is held by Russia by virtue of this war is winning, going back to the border as it existed 13, 14 months ago? Does winning include Crimea also being returned to Ukraine? I mean, it's very complicated to define winning, but this thesis of his, how we are, quote, eager to avoid pressing Moscow too hard militarily. Quote, today, White House policy is essentially, we support Ukraine's defending itself, but not enough to be too effective. Worthy conversation. So I'm looking forward to having him on the program today to talk about this. And after a lot of deliberation, the way in which I worded the poll question, thank you, TC, for going back and forth on this, is the military support being given to Ukraine by U.S. and NATO intended to defend against Russia or actually win the war? I think the answer is the former, not the latter, right? If it were to win the war, then they'd have the F-16s and they would have whatever missile capability would be necessary to strike Moscow and other parts of Russia, and we wouldn't be keeping them so contained. I mean, that's just an observation on my part. I'm not saying it's the wrong call. Bolton is saying it's the wrong call. I'm agreeing with his assessment. And by the way, I think in the same way that we limit how far we're willing to go, I think Putin is doing the same thing. I mean, and maybe I'll ask this of Ambassador Bolton today. Couldn't Putin level Kyiv if he wanted to? So each side seems to be, it's almost like a rope-a-dope strategy between them. And meanwhile, you know, thousands of people are dying. But each is trying to anticipate the other so that it doesn't have a cataclysmic result. That'll be my focus with Ambassador Bolton today, hoping that you will go and vote and answer the question of our level of support. What's the goal? What's the goal? To keep Russia at bay or to win? Or to win. So there's that. Apropos of nothing, did you watch FDU upset Purdue last night? It was unbelievable. And on the heels of Princeton and Arizona, I don't think there are any brackets left. I don't know. I mean, What are the odds? A gazillion to one. I'm contemplating a Sunday survey that says something like, which will be the first to have a perfect bracket? AI, an individual, or human, neither. That it'll never happen. I like that though, right? Which will be the first? Which will be, I think I'd say which, not who, because of AI, but I'd have to think that through too. Which will be the first to fill out a perfect bracket? A human, artificial intelligence, or neither? Non sequitur number 2 for all of you today. I believe that I am wearing the oldest tie in my wardrobe. This is a Brooks Brothers tie given to me in the early 80s. It may have even been 80 by my brother. He doesn't even know that he gave it to me. I may have to remind him. Yeah, Brooks Brothers. He gave me a blue one and a red one. And over the years, I've recycled, all of my ties, but not these two. And I have not worn this. I haven't worn this in 30 years. And it's so funny because of the width of it. It's relatively thin. And then ties got fatter, and then they got thin again, much like my waistline. But I think it's okay. But like me in a prior life, me in my go-go 80s Republican, Reagan Bush, by the way, still have the greatest of admiration for both of them. Give me Ronald Reagan and George Herbert Walker Bush, I'm still a Republican. Anyway, back in those days, this was my tie. I probably wore this tie during my internship with Vice President George Herbert Walker Bush. In fact, I think I have a picture. If I can dig it up I'll put it on Instagram. I think I've got a photograph of me wearing this tie with Papa Bush in the 80s. There's actually a photograph at the end of an internship that I did where I was able to go in and do, the grin and grip. I'm not sure. I may have been wearing this tie. Yeah. All right, back to business. So what else do I have? I've got Ambassador Bolton. You're going to vote on the poll question today about Ukraine and our level of support and whether we've got them on too tight of a leash. Another subject, this banking crisis and concerns that we're headed for recession. Front page today. What's interesting? As Wall Street, raised billions of dollars to try and stave off further collapse this week, I was taken with the approach of a regional banker from Texas who has, about 100,000 depositors. Do you know what he did? He emailed all of them his personal phone number. And because remember, what's the goal? The goal here is, what do the Brits say? Stay calm, carry on. Keep calm, carry on. Keep calm, carry on. The goal is to prevent a run on a bank. So this banker in Texas sends out his personal phone number. And by the way, of about 100,000 depositors, and I might be off in my numbers, but you'll get the point. Of like 100,000 depositors, I think about 100 send him a text message. And that's maybe a glass half empty way of looking at it. Like, oh, he sent out 100, and only 100 responded. No. That misses the point. How many people would have reached out for him if he'd done nothing? I assume that it was the comfort of receiving a note from the president says, your money's secure, and here's my number. That did the job. So his name is Brad Tidwell, and he will be my guest. Congressman Tim Ryan, former Congressman Tim Ryan, former senatorial candidate Tim Ryan from the great state of Ohio. I like Tim Ryan. He's been a radio and TV guest of mine in the past. We will be here to talk about third-party candidacies. This to me is really an interesting issue as well. No labels. The nonpartisan, self-identified centrist group, they want to get things done, compromise. I'm all for that. They are working now to secure ballot position for the presidential race all across the country. I don't know that they're going to be successful in all 50 states, but they're on 3 so far. And they're aiming for at least 23. And they want to have a position on the ballot secured so that they say, here's their word choice. In the event both major parties nominate presidential candidates that the vast majority of Americans don't want, then they're saying that they will give ballot position, to a candidate who is appropriate or appealing to the disenfranchised. And this has set off alarm bells, particularly among Democrats who believe that if it's a Biden-Trump race, that it'll pull more from Biden than it'll pull from Trump. Tim Ryan is with Third Way, and they are one such group with that concern. By the way, my take on this is that I need to know more from No Labels, because if they're saying, well, this is only in the event that Americans are dissatisfied with the two choices, if the two choices are Biden and Trump, I've already seen the polling data that says Americans don't want either. So is that going to force the hand of No Labels? This is a really interesting debate. Tim Ryan will be here to have it. And then finally, as she was my guest on radio this week, Denise Hollins is going to be my guest. Denise Hollins is the vice chair of the African American Reparations Advisory Committee in San Francisco. You've seen the headlines of San Francisco having produced this study, this report, speaking of ways that the African American community of San Francisco, so long as you can establish residency and lineage to people who were enslaved, talking about doing something like 100 different proposals. One of them was $5 million per person. So, of course, that's what gets the headline. I had her on radio because I just wanted to understand, like, what's the thinking? What's the need? How are you going to get this done? Some people in social media are like, oh, you're so nice to her. And like, I should have beat her up and said, what, this is stupid. You can never pay for it, yada, yada, yada. You make up your own mind. I wanted to learn. And I like the conversation. So she'll be my guest on CNN today as well. Pretty good, right? Reparations, third-party candidacy, the banking situation, the war in Ukraine. Going to cover all of that on CNN today. And last thought, if I may, it's going to be an interesting week. Look at Smerconish.com today, because, of course, in the newsletter, I've got the coverage of the speculation that this week, Donald Trump could be indicted by the Manhattan District Attorney in connection with the hush money paid to Stormy Daniels. It seems like game on. I believe that is the weakest of the four buckets of potential cases where he has legal exposure, criminal exposure. So it does seem like Alvin Bragg is going to go first in a case that the feds passed on when they looked at it. What will be the impact on Trump? I don't think you're going to see a mugshot. I think he'll get fingerprinted. I'm not positive about that. But, like the whole aspect of him, this is like Bonfire of the Vanities, Tom Wolfe kind of stuff. The idea of him coming back to New York, because I believe he'll have to come back to New York to be processed, is stunning. Like in the midst of this insane news cycle, that could get added to the mix. Wow. So, yeah, I'm back to my old glasses because of the situation with the new ones. I'm going to go to the optometrist after the show today and try and figure out, like, what's the plan, because I've got an old prescription in my old glasses and I was looking to make a change, but you know how that went. I got the new ones, loved them, went on TV. They just didn't work. So, all right, now you know what's going on in my world. Combination of the old tie and the old glasses. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being tuned in. I really do appreciate it. TC After Dark. If you want to improve your communication and even argument skills, give her a listen. Please watch me on CNN at 9 a.m. Eastern time. And also, so long as there's no breaking news, 3 p.m. Always have to add that caveat, 3 p.m. One last thing. Will you please go to Smerconish.com and right now cast a ballot on today's poll question about Ukraine? I assume you're all registered for the daily newsletter, but if not, please register for it. And final thought is I released some great podcast episodes of myself this week. They're all accessible via Smerconish.com. I'll see you. Have a good day.